when Pastor Danny asked me to teach, I just, I'm not the greatest teacher in the world, of course, but I thought it would be good to present something that I'm kind of familiar with in my personal Bible study. I've kind of been doing a study of Revelation. A lot of people are doing that right now just because we're in a time in our country and really in the world where, we're looking at things that are really telling as where we are in terms of history. And so that actually kind of led me as I begin to study Revelation, and you get into what's going to happen not only with the church and with Israel, but also what's going to happen with Satan. And it ended up with me going back and looking at, I wanted to know more about his origins and things like that, and so I began to do some digging. And so I'm just going to share with you guys tonight a lot of what I found, and it's interesting. Some of this you will already know, some of it you won't. I found it to be quite telling, and especially in knowing, in any good battle, any war that you're in, you have to know your enemy. And when you understand the enemy, it helps you to prepare yourself a little bit better. So there's actually a lot more to this study than just the passage in Ezekiel that we're going to cover tonight. But we'll just, I don't think time would allow for that, so I just decided to focus on something that we could cover fairly thoroughly. So Satan's beginning, origin of evil. First of all, what I want to do is dispel one thing that is very common in our world, where a lot of people think that Satan is not an actual person. They're just a personification of evil, as you would say. Satan is, when people refer to Satan, they're just referring to evil in general. And I'm surprised at how many people actually believe that to be true, as opposed to Satan actually being a person or a being. And so, so one thing we need to establish is that he's an actual person, not some kind of force or or just a personification. And in fact, a lot of people that when they think of Satan, this is the kind of thing that they think of is this big red guy with a bunch of horns and all this other kind of stuff. And when in fact, this is a terrible example, but he's going to be much more attractive. He's definitely going to be not what you would expect, or not what a lot of people expect in the way that he looks. So a couple of things to note about Satan in ways that we can know that he is a person or a being is, number one, he has intelligence. When you look at Job 1, chapter 1, verses 8 through 10, it says, "And the Lord said unto Satan, Thou hast considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught?" So here we have Satan, and we can see that he has intelligence. He's creating an argument. He's creating a debate here, and so we know in order to create a debate, you have to be an intelligent person in order to process this information. Another one is that he has emotion. We can look at Revelation 12:12, where it says, "Therefore rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time." So to experience wrath, you have to be able to experience emotions, just like we do. Another thing is he has volition. That's a big word. I had to look that one up, but basically it just means a will, or and we can see this in 2 Timothy 2:26, where it says, "And that they may recover themselves out of the snare of the devil, who are taken captive by him at his will." And a will just would be a determination, or a goal, or focus. And again, this is not another personification. He is morally responsible, and in other words, being held to account to by God. And we can see this in 1 John 3:8, where he says, "He that committeth sin is of the devil, for the devil sinneth from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifest, that he might destroy the works of the devil." So he chose to sin. So sin, it takes. I mean, you have to have some kind of a moral compass when you choose good or bad. Most of the time, you establish that decision based on where you are morally as a person. So there's actually more examples than this. All I wanted to do is just capture a few. to demonstrate that Satan is an actual being, not a personification of evil. Evil as an effect. So, huh? Yeah, he's not human. Yeah, I would say a being. Yeah, yeah. I mean, basically, just a being is probably the best term, because he's definitely not human, and but he definitely is a being who interacts. Yes, yes. And we're actually going to cover some of that in just a minute. Huh? Oh, well, so basically, to begin, what I want to do is look at, I'm just going to go ahead and read through Ezekiel 28:11 through 19. And then what we'll do is, once I read through that, then we're going to back up and we're going to look at what it's actually saying. So in chapter 28 of Ezekiel, basically this is God addressing the prince of Tyre and the king of Tyre through the prophet Ezekiel. And just a little bit of background. So the prince of Tyre is someone who Satan elevated. He was a human. He was a man that Satan elevated to a position of wealth and power in this kingdom of Tyre, to the degree that this prince, if you will, actually became very full of himself. He got very confident, if you will, and he began to get so wealthy and so powerful that he began to think quite highly of himself, to the degree that he thought, you know what, I think people should worship me. I'm like a god. And that was his biggest mistake. It's because, God, there's several examples in Scripture where pride is something that God will not tolerate. And so God said, you know what, I'm done with you. I'm going to shut you down. So he sends Ezekiel there to tell him. But during the course of this, God doesn't just address the prince, he addresses the power behind the prince, which is even more important, because when you're addressing someone and you're not really getting to the core of what they're or to the basis of where their power is coming from. So Ezekiel switches gears, and we actually get to learn a little bit of a history lesson. And there's actually several times in the Bible where you'll have a lot of times it's a prophet, but then there's other examples where we'll be seeing an address being given, and God will sidestep that address and give us a history lesson. And that's basically what he does here. He sort of switches gears. So we're just going to pick it up right when he starts to tell us. It gives us a little bit of history. So we look at chapter 28, verses 11 through 19. And it says, "Moreover, the word of God came unto me, saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation against the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, Thou sealest up the sum full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering, the sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, the carbuncle, and gold. The workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee. By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before the kings, that they may behold thee. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thine iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic. Therefore will I bring forth the fire from the midst of thee, that it shall devour thee, and I will bring thee to the ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that hold thee. And all they that know thee among the people shall be astonished at thee. Thou shalt be a terror, and never shalt thou be any more." So, we have this little cryptic, like a little cryptic history lesson here, where we're getting a little bit of information on Satan. Now, there is some debate. There are some, as Will mentioned before the class, there are some people that don't think that this is talking about Satan. But when you look at what's inside these verses, it really only fits one person, the only one character in the Bible, if you will, and that definitely would be Satan. So let's take a look at starting in verse 12, where it says, "Sealest up the sum." So he was given the highest quality of attributes of all beings. So whenever whenever God made him, it just says that basically sealest up the sum. He had the best. I mean, he was outfitted with every possible thing. When you look at when you're looking at everything that he has, and we're actually going to be going through that a little bit. We're going to see that God spared no. He didn't hold back whenever he created Satan, which at this time, as we'll see, or as we can allude to in Isaiah, he's actually called Lucifer there. But anyway, he was given everything. Let me grab my little notes here. Oh, it's Isaiah 14. Yeah, see, I started to actually cover that in too, but didn't know that we'd have time to do that. Also in verse 12, it talks about perfect in beauty, and so it's covered in precious stones. I've actually heard one commentator on this compare. If you know your Old Testament, whenever the priests had their garment, they actually wore a chest plate with precious stones on it, and I think there is a valid comparison to some of the things that Satan wore. Maybe it had something to do with that. That I'm not sure, but I know that a lot of the stones are similar. So that's actually quite telling, especially when you think about his position, which we'll learn a little bit about here in just a minute. Something interesting too is in verse 13 it says, "Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God." So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on it, but when you think about that, some say, oh, it just means that he was in the garden when Eve was there, or whenever he tempted Eve to be able to sin. But there's others. You got to remember, before the garden was created before sin, and there were things going on in the garden, and we do know the Bible tells us that God walked with Adam and Eve, and Satan was there. Now I don't know where. There's some debate about when the fall happened. A lot of it believe that it happened sometime between verses 2 and 3 of chapter 1 of Genesis. But when you look at the has walked in Eden, he could have been there before the fall. So that's quite interesting. Just from what we know right now, again, perfect in beauty and everything else. To me, it almost seems like he might have been the worship leader or something, and I think we'll learn a little bit about that here in just a minute as well. So actually, that brings us to the workmanship of thy tabrets and pipes. So he was a musician. Because whenever verse 13 talks about the workmanship, tabrets and pipes, this is an indicator of, that he would be a musician. So now you take that where it says, you go back to verse 12 where it says, "Sealest up the sum." That means he was the best. So when you think about it, think about a musician. Think about perfect music and that sort of thing. He was, anytime that we see music mentioned in the Bible, it's always in worship, and so, being the, maybe he was the leader of worship, I don't know, but he could have been, and, just having so much skill. And the thing is what's crazy is here on earth, if we have a protege who is really great with a particular instrument, it takes years to get that way. Satan came preloaded with the absolute best of skills, and which I think is fascinating. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yes. Mm. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. And so and there is no doubt in my mind that he hasn't used that. I mean, with like I say, we're going to learn as we go along that there's a certain subtlety, and him being so uh, wise, if you will, based on what brand of wisdom you're talking about, he still his intelligence level is far above even most of the angels. Um, and also and well, we'll see it here in just a minute again, but that is interesting because that was the one thought that I had whenever I started studying this, that him being a musician, I mean, there's no doubt that he calls on all of the skill sets that he has to be able to accomplish things. So, and this is something interesting too. You know, we also in verse 13 it just says, talks about the tabrets and pipes, but then it says, "In the day that thou wast created." So this is how we know Satan is a created being. He's not. People have all these different ideas, but he really was. He was created. And something that one of the studies that I looked at just asked the question, who created Satan? And of course, it's God. But more specifically, it tells us in Colossians 1:16, and it says, "For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones, dominions, principalities, or powers, all things were created by him and for him." Jesus Christ created Satan. And that just blows people's minds, but he did. And there's other examples in the Bible. This is the clearest one because Paul here is talking about. No, go ahead. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Well, to me too, it changes my perspective of where Satan is coming from in terms of, because you have the Mormons that believe that they're brothers and things, and it's like, and the thing is, it also lets us know that Satan's God in Jesus Christ is truly far more powerful than Satan is, and sometimes we give away too much. Yes. Mm. Mm. Yeah. That's true. Well, that's true. Yes, that's very true. And I'm gonna rabbit trail just a little bit here because the Bible talks about Satan being the prince of the power of the air. Well, where does air exist? On the earth. So Satan has been given dominion over the earth for a time, and that means, he was given free reign. In fact, whenever you look at in the New Testament, whenever he took Jesus up on the mountain, and he was just saying, "Hey, if you'll worship me, I'll give you all these things." Satan owns that right now. God allows it for now, but he truly does have dominion here on the earth, and that's one of the reasons why. You know, something else too is that it's become apparent to me as I look at this that Satan, there's a lot that he doesn't know. In fact, Satan knew that a Messiah would come, but there was no way he knew when or how. So Satan really doesn't understand the timeline, and God. And if you look through the Old Testament, especially when it comes to the bloodline of Christ, you go through. Satan tried to destroy the bloodline of Christ even from the very get-go, because he knew if he could taint the bloodline, that the Messiah would never be born. And there's so many times where God was 3 steps ahead of him, and basically was it the blood curse on King Jehoiakim, where so many, in fact, even today, many people believe that he was a descendant of David. And anyhow, God ended up, it ended up being through adoption and some other stuff. It's kind of crazy. That's another whole Bible study right there. But God actually outsmarted Satan 3 or 4 steps ahead. And, just the fact that him being a created being, we have to balance our view of him. So basically, we have to understand he's defeatable, but also that he is much more powerful than, these people who just want to throw out, I'm going to hold my crucifix up and I'm going to, well, we know what happened to some of the early disciples who were, who weren't given the power over them. They got their behinds kicked, and and there's a couple of examples of that. So we have to try to balance our view. But anyway, I digress on that. But going back to our verses. So if we go to verse 14, where it says, "Anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so." So anointed, it just means set apart, and covereth means he was given authority. So cover. So if you are given authority to cover something, it means you're in charge. So this goes back to what we were saying. So we know he was a musician, and he was in charge. So he was given power. He was given dominion over. My guess is his worship. That's just the best thing that we can come up with based on what we know that his initial skill set was. But basically, God set him apart, and and what I love too is that here, because he's addressing the sin, and he's addressing this person, the Prince of Tyre, and as well as Satan himself, God makes sure to tell him, "I have set thee so." And so God is still clearly in charge at the end of it all. But so anyway, looking at verse 14, we know that he was in charge. Probably a lot of people just think he was basically the worship leader for heaven. Let's see here. Let's get going. I'm trying to stay ahead on my slides so I can keep my thought processes. So verse 14 also tells us that it says, "Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire." So something interesting about that is we know that Satan was cast out. There's lots of references to him being cast out. But I can't find any in this context. Now, Revelation talks about him being cast out of heaven. You have to learn how to separate when he is cast out at the fall, or at his fall, and what he was cast out of during Revelation. Whenever we look at these inferences to Satan, especially in the Old Testament, it says he was cast out of the mountain. So basically, he wasn't cast out of heaven at that time, and we know that because he was in heaven when he was accusing Job. So we know that he still had access. He had limited access, but when we're talking about the mountain of God and the stones of fire, the only references to the stones of fire that we can cobble together is there's a few instances where it appears stones of fire would be the throne room of God. So if Satan was, so now we're putting this together where Satan was in charge of worship in the throne room of God Almighty, and so he's walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. When you go to Revelation, I think I pulled one reference, 4:2-5, where it says God the Father on his throne being compared to precious stones. Yeah, and the phrase "in the midst of the stones of fire" is believed by many biblical scholars to be a reference to the throne room of God. So when you look at that, and especially whenever you, and I think even Ezekiel, whenever you look at the wheel, when it talks about Ezekiel and the wheels and all that he did there, there's instances where it mentions stones and other things, and so the only time you ever see stones when it talks about God's God's throne room, they're always talking about the throne room. So it is my belief that that's what this is talking about, is that Satan, was in the throne room, and then once the fall happened, he was cast out of there forever. He was never allowed back in. And like I say, because we know that later he's in there accusing Job, he clearly had access somehow, and we also know that he accuses the saints day and night. So I guess the debate there would be where is the accusation? Where is he at whenever the accusations are flying? I don't know, but it just based on what I've been able to find, I happen to think that he still has limited access to heaven, because there is a time in Revelation where once the church is raptured, actually I think that's it. I think once the church is raptured is when he is expelled and he's never allowed to go. But anyway, that's something that you can search out, and something that I have looked into, but I have not studied it out completely. But verse 15 says, "Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee." So Satan, I don't know that he was always evil. I know that we did look at something that God did say he was evil from the beginning, and I think that Satan, this is where we start getting into the realm of assumptions, which can be dangerous. But anyway, since we're talking, whenever God says he's evil from the beginning, I think he means from the beginning of creation, the creation of the earth. So I don't think that I think pre-creation. I don't know how that works out, but basically there was a time that whether it was a short period of time or not, he was basically created perfect. And the thing is too that when you look at we were looking at like Isaiah. I think I brought this up here before. Isaiah. You were talking about Isaiah 14. Yeah. That tells us the 5 I wills that began his decline. So there was a point in time when Satan starts to consider, at least there was a short period of time where he was reveled, or at least followed and obeyed by those that reported to him. And he must have been pretty popular, is all I know, because he's definitely very convincing, because we know he took a third of the angels with him when he went. But so there was a point in time where he did his duties the way he was supposed to, however short or long it might have been, until he decided to make these statements of I will do this and I will do that, which I think we're going to find out at some point that God's I wills are way stronger than his. Yes. Oh, right, yeah. So actually, now I believe that dispute. Some believe it was just because Satan is more powerful than Michael. I'm not sure if that's true or not. It could be, but I also think that God's authority structure that he had. So the cherubim are the top. You can really get into, if you get into angelology, you can see that you have your cherubim and then you have your archangels, and God has a military structure to heaven, and the cherubim is basically like a 4-star general. I mean, they are the top. They're the top rung, and so whenever it came to this debate, Michael ended up deferring to the commander. God himself, we ended up deferring to that, and we could get to another whole debate about Moses, but go ahead. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and we definitely know Michael's pretty powerful as well. Just because the instances where Michael was in charge of the angel armies, and there's a couple of instances there. So Michael was, he's powerful in his own right, for sure. But yeah, I think that and again, all that's just assumptions, but it makes sense that would be where Michael would go. Okay, if you're here, I'm going up the chain a little bit, because it doesn't say, because you notice that it doesn't say they fought, it said they disputed. So although we do know in Daniel that there was a time when there were angels who did physically wrestle, or there was an actual war, but we don't necessarily read that that it was Michael. Maybe it was, I don't know, but I'll have to go back and look at that. But anyway, I think that's interesting. Is talking about the passage in Jude, because as a side note, I still believe that that Moses is going to be the other prophet that comes back at the end times. A lot of people believe it was Enoch. I don't think it's going to be Enoch. I think it's going to be Elijah and Moses. And the reason why I think that is because the powers that are going to be given to them, calling down fire from the sky, we know that's Elijah. But when it talks about shutting off the rain, and all those things, Moses, I mean, when we compare what Moses did, all the plagues that he called on Egypt, and then the fact that Satan was disputing for his body, why would he do that? There's got to be a reason. And what I have found is these little bits of information that the Bible will drop, there's always a reason why. So I don't know. There's some debate about that too, because a lot of people still think it's Enoch because he didn't die. He just basically walked to heaven, But anyway, I just think that all those things are interesting. So. Oh, seraphims. Yeah. Now that I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, the seraphims, I do know this, that the seraphims are also in the throne room. I don't know what they do, though. Yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I don't know. I do need to. That'd be an interesting study to see, because there's probably clues to that. And a lot of this stuff really doesn't. When it comes to salvation, none of this matters. But it does. It does. What this kind of stuff does is it actually just lights my fire to read the Bible more. Because this information is there, and we know that it's all true. So anyway, it's just pretty interesting. So anyway, going on. So verse 16, it says, "By the multitude of thy merchandise thou hast filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned." So basically, another way of saying this would be by the amount of what you are selling. So basically, Satan, think about this. He convinced a third of the angels to go. He was selling an idea. He sold them an idea. And so, when you look at the idea he was selling and how he sold it, he's basically, God just says, hey, you filled the midst of you with violence, and you've sinned. So I thought that was interesting how it was put, by the multitude of thy merchandise. Because sometimes when you have to search some of these words out and trying to understand what was being said here a little bit more, I thought was good. But so carrying on in verse 16, it just says, "And therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God." So going back to what I had mentioned before, it is my opinion that Satan was cast out of God's throne room and not out of heaven as a whole, because he is currently allowed to accuse believers to the Lord, and I believe that he will be banned from heaven permanently sometime after the rapture of the church. And this is kind of alluded to, and where I picked that up from is if you read Revelation 12, when it's kind of it's giving you a shotgun view of what's going to happen in the end times. It also makes reference to him being cast out of heaven at that point. And if you look at where it says he's being cast out of heaven, it happens to be after the rapture of the church in that account when you go down the timeline. So that's why I think there's a difference between heaven as a whole and the throne room. I think the throne room is so holy, and I think heaven is in general too, but I just mean that once he made that violation, that is limited access, I guess, if you think about it. The throne room, not anybody can just step in there. Even the beings of heaven can't just step into the throne room unless they are assigned there. So because God's God, and that's where He sits on the throne. So He he gives a lot of limited access. So also in verse 16 He says, "I will destroy thee." So it gives me comfort too to know, as savvy as our enemy is, God did not start the war, but He will finish it. And this is exactly how this war will end, is God will end up destroying Satan at the end. Obviously, by destroy, it just means destroying his power, destroying his quality of life. He will still be alive and well and suffering in punishment in the lake of fire. Moving on to verse 17, talks about thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by the reason of thy brightness. So I'll tell you some of the biggest punishments that I think I've ever seen Christians in general and people go through has all been rooted in pride. There's so much stuff that we do that's rooted in pride. I mean, a lot. And God absolutely cannot stand pride. Whenever we do something and we stand back and go, "Oh, look at what I've done," or whenever we seek, I think that's one of the reasons why Hollywood is so corrupt and they're just so wicked. A lot of it is rooted in pride. They build these reputations up and they're making millions of dollars, and they throw around all this influence and things that they have. And I think that the day's going to come where we're going to see them stand before Almighty God and have to give an account for that, when they will receive their sentence. But I think that pride also, and this is the thing. It's real easy for us to go, I try to keep my pride in check and all these things. Satan had the maximum dose of wisdom that could be given to a being at the time, and yet it still corrupted him. So we have to be very careful. It's very subtle. The pride can really kind of sneak up on us. And obviously there is a difference between sinful pride and just taking pride in things that you do. Those are two different things. So I want to make that distinction because I've a lot of the younger generation, I don't want to give them too bad a rap, but I mean, to be honest, a lot of times the one problem is people don't take workmanship type pride in the things that they do, meaning I want to do my best, and I think I'm not sure what brand of pride that you would call it, but when you're doing your best for others and for the Lord, particularly for the Lord, maybe not in that order, but for the Lord first and then for others, that type of pride, if you want to call it that, is what would be considered honorable. When we're setting aside, when we don't care about what other people think about it. When we are serving, you're serving and you're doing your best, and you don't care if people are watching or not. You just do your best simply because it's the right thing to do and because that's what God expects. I think that's definitely worth notating here. But yeah, going back to verse 12, God did point that out, that Lucifer was full of wisdom before the betrayal. Now, something that Pastor Danny mentioned last week that kind of applies here. So, and this is my perspective, I'm going to say, but Lucifer's betrayal falls under God's permissive will that Pastor Danny mentioned last week, that God didn't want the fall to happen. Lucifer was free to do just as we do. He made a choice that changed the course of creation. God knew all the baggage that comes with free will, but He loved us so much, He gave it to us anyway and made a way for us to be with Him, even though we misuse that free will. Because so many, I thought it was really interesting what Pastor Danny said, how God has, His will is basically two parts. You have His sovereign will and you have His permissive will. His sovereign will is basically defined by the I wills in the Bible. You go through and there's some things that God says, I am staking a flag in this and it will not move. This is going to happen. Those things, that's God's sovereign will. But then we have His permissive will, where He says, okay, you've been given free will. I'm going to allow you to make a choice. And just like any parent, when you're looking at a child, sometimes our kids make dumb choices. And sometimes as parents, we have to allow them to make mistakes, or or even just basically having to stand back, and even though you know what's going to happen, you have enough life experience. That would be his permissive will, where he may not necessarily want something to happen, but he doesn't stand in the way of something unfolding. It also doesn't mean that he doesn't know what's going to go down. We actually, Brother Mike and I were talking earlier in the office about God's perspective. A lot of times, I thought this was interesting. I'd heard it described this way. If you can imagine being on the 5th story of a building, right at the corner as the Christmas parade's coming down, and you can see what's coming and what's rounding the corner, and you can see what's going down this way. Now, if you're the person that's standing just right around that corner, all you're seeing is just right here what's in front of you. But when you're seeing the timeline, and you're seeing what's coming, and you're seeing where it's going, and you already know what the outcome's going to be, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go down there and make changes. It just means you understand what's happening. And I think that in God's permissive will, there's a lot of things that he sees and knows the outcome, but he's going to choose not to involve, because, as we said before, Satan is the prince of the power of the air. He's been given dominion here, and there are certain things like, when we think about people who do acts of terrorism and things like that, could God intervene? Yes, he could. But right now we are given, because mankind was given free will, people do despicable things. And, there will be a time they will give an account for those things. But God, through his permissive will, he looks at things from the eternal perspective. He doesn't look at things in the we have a tendency to look at things in a finite way, where we go, oh, okay, we can, if something dies, it's just gone forever, and all those kinds of things. And God looks at the eternal perspective of things, and I think also part of a side note, that's why prayer is so important, because I think that there's been times that God would have allowed something through his permissive will. But through faithful Christians going, God, could you please get involved in this? Where he goes, you know what? I think I will step in here. And he does, because of the faithfulness of those asking him, just like any father would do, he gets involved. That's why prayer is so important, because that permissive will, there's things that, even some bad things that God doesn't like, but may occur, and then faithful gets together and they lift up somebody in prayer, or lift up a problem in prayer, and God decides to step in and get involved. So it's really important. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Years ago. That's true. That's very true. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, he already knows. He's already read all of the outcomes. He already knows. Yeah. Mm. No. Mm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm. Right. Right. Well, also too, God gets a bad rap for stuff a lot. Like, one of the things that I don't like is whenever someone's life is taken suddenly or something happens and they go, well, it was just God's will, it was just their time to go. Now, did God know that they were going to go home at that time? Yes, he did. Did God want that to happen? No, not necessarily. I mean, believe me, there are Christians that I have seen God go, you know what? You've been given chance after chance after chance, therefore. And I've seen God take people. But in general, that doesn't necessarily mean, Michelle just had a friend that passed away recently. No, I don't believe that it was God's will for her to go. I just don't believe that. I mean, I could be wrong, I don't know, but I'm just saying that sometimes, people attribute those things to God when sometimes it could be bad choices. It could be bad choices by someone else that those things occur, and yet, and God, again, in his permissive will, stands back and he's heartbroken over it, but because he's laid this principle of free will here and given that to us, there's going to be a time that the responsibility of free will, that we will be addressed for it. But I think that sometimes God gets such a bad rap whenever we attribute every loss to him, because allowing something to happen and making that thing happen is not the same thing. So I think it's important to look at it that way, because God is not a mean God. If you look, and in fact, the more you study out this kind of stuff, the more you realize he has given everyone a chance. He's given, way more than we deserve. He's done so much, and in fact, we think about our country. We don't deserve the stuff that we have by any means, and yet he's been so gracious to give it to us, and we just squander it and throw it away, and it's awful. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Well, imagine what things he may endure if you weren't praying for him. Because I'm telling you, God does listen. He does listen. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They're right. Yeah. Mm. Oh yeah. Yeah. Thanks to Starlink, now you can be in the jungle and get internet service. Literally, you can be in the middle of nowhere. Uh, right, Oscar? Oh, all right. So going back, let's see. Looking at verse 17, it says, I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. So the antidote for pride, now a lot of times, is humiliation. That's and so that's God's remedy for that. So Satan has lifted himself up. He's showing power, and God says, I am going to strike you down. I'm going to take you down, and then I'm going to parade you in front of everybody that thought you were so great and show them how weak you really are because of your pride, because of the things that you've done. And it says, God says he's going to lay him before kings. Imagine what that means. It doesn't mean he's going to be dead. It means he is going to be laid on his face in front of kings, and they're going to be saying that we did all this because of this. That's basically what they're going to be saying at that time when the end comes for him. And as I said, laying that would indicate being prostrate as an act of submission. So prostrate is basically just laying face down, almost in an act of obedience, or when you think about servants and things like that, whenever they would beg for their life or things like that, you think of laying prostrate, which is it's as low to the ground as you can get. Basically, is what that is. Verse 18 says, "Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thine iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic." So basically, Satan has made unclean the places that he used to frequent, such as the Garden of Eden. He's done this by the sins and by the sins of his minions. So if you think about this, he's defiled all these. God made the earth. The earth began as perfect, and then it became defiled. And Satan is the one who defiled it. He came down. He's the one that conned. Eve had a choice to make, but the thing is when you go back and you look, he's extremely, in his wisdom, he's no fool. He knows how to talk you into things that you might not normally do. There's ways that he has of convincing you. I fully believe that Satan was 100% behind the Cain and Abel, the first murder. I mean, who knows what whispering Cain may have heard in his ear to cause Cain to sin the way that he did. So there was a lot of those kinds of things going on where Satan took what God made good and he defiled it, and he continues to do so. So then we'll kind of get down here into verse 18. It says, "Therefore will I bring forth the fire from the midst of thee, it shall devour thee, and I will bring thee to ashes upon the earth in the sight of them that behold thee." So Satan's ultimate end is the lake of fire. And I think this is going to be a reference to that, as well as, he's going to be. All of this is going to unfold in front of our eyes as the redeemed. We're going to witness this person that made our life so miserable and caused us, a lot of the pain that we have had to experience here. The whole reason why Jesus Christ had to be tortured and crucified was because of his acts that he did. So, I think that this is, and especially, where it says, "in the sight of them that behold thee." So it's going to happen. All this is going to happen in front of an audience. Again, going back to what we were saying about pride in there. All right, we're almost done. I think I got just enough time to try to finish this up. So verse 18 also says, "Therefore will I bring forth the fire from the midst of thee, so it shall devour thee." And then it says, verse 19 says, and they that know thee among the people shall be astonished at thee. Thou shalt be a terror, and never shalt thou be any more. So, again, going back to what we were saying about the humiliation being the antidote for pride, basically all those who, and by the way, I fully believe that he's going to be trotted out in front of the people, those who chose to serve him as well. I really do, because they're going to see their leader that they thought was going to win. They made these commitments, and they're going to see the person that they thought win get absolutely destroyed in front of in front of all these folks. Now I don't know whether I don't really know how that'll play out, but I fully believe that that's the case, because I think that's going to be it. So that's all I've got for this particular thing. But one thing that I wanted to point out before we close for sure is go real quick to Isaiah 14:9. I want to read that to you, or you can read along with me if you want to, because we didn't do Isaiah 14 tonight. But I love this verse, and this is how I wanted to wrap it up with this verse, where it says, Isaiah 14:9, it says, "Hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It has raised up from their thrones and all the kings of the nations." This is the other thing, but God basically says hell is coming for you. Imagine that. Imagine being told by God Almighty that hell is coming for you. And basically that's God going, your clock's ticking. Your time is almost up. And I mean, that is, we have to remember that the enemy has already lost. The war we're fighting will come to an end, but we have to maintain the work that we're doing in the ministry. We have to continue to try to witness to others. I fully believe, now again, I'm going to rabbit trail super quick here. I believe that God has a number in mind. God knows who the last one to be saved is going to be. He knows. And I believe that, and I don't think Satan has any clue where that ticker is at. And one of the things that I feel like is true too, Satan knows that, I think one thing he does know, because it's in the Bible itself, we know that Satan knows the Bible, by the way. He knows that he has 7 years from the time that the last person is saved and the rapture of the church happens until God pronounces the end. So he's got 7 years to obliterate Israel to prevent them from calling the Messiah back. So one of the reasons why he's so desperate, one of the reasons why I fully believe, this is my opinion, that the Antichrist is alive and well right now. But I think he's always been. I think that he's been alive for generations. I think that it's a different. Maybe it's a different person, but he keeps somebody in the wings because he didn't know where the ticker is. He don't know. He doesn't know where we're at on that ticker. Just every time somebody is saved, he don't know where we're at. So he's got somebody ready to roll, so that whenever the time comes and the rapture of the church happens, he has to move quickly. 7 years is not very long. It's not long, and that's one of the reasons why. Again, if you know him, he's gonna whenever the Antichrist comes out, no one's gonna recognize him. He's not gonna look anything like people think he is. He's gonna seem like the most conservative. He's gonna seem like the most loyal and the most wise person. He's just gonna come out here, and then it's gonna take 3.5 years to con most people. And when that happens, then it is on. If you go through and you look at the seals of a Revelation, you look at the vials that get poured out, he is going to hammer Israel as hard and fast as he can. He's going to take as many as he possibly can in an effort to try to destroy them, to prevent them from coming back. Mm. 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 Oh, true. Yeah. Mm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, if you think about it too, prior to COVID, I always thought, man, it'd be really hard to kind of get everybody all in sync. I really thought that. And then when the COVID happened, all of a sudden everybody's lined up, and it's like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. They used fear-mongering and tactics in order to get everyone in line, and all of a sudden you have this universal control, globally control. So I don't want to, hopefully, I don't know if they're going to post this or not, but they probably won't let Matt Swofford speak anymore. But anyway, one other thing is, I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing UFOs. I think that's why. DOD. So, yeah. Yeah, oh, yeah. It's almost something like right out of a movie. It's almost something like right out of a movie. But the videos, if you go on YouTube and you watch them, the DOD, when I knew that when the Department of Defense released the videos and people started to critique them, the experts are convinced they're real. And I'm not saying that they're not, but I do think it is a spiritual thing. I think it's smoke and mirrors from the enemy to prepare for an explanation for the mass exodus of the church. I mean, I could be wrong, but it sure seems to fit the bill, so who knows? Yeah. Yeah. I know. Yeah. I can't remember his name. Ben Stein. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would yeah, an angel's an alien. Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's all defining terms. Just defining terms. That's all. Yeah. All right. Well, let's here. I don't want to keep y'all. I appreciate y'all putting up with all my yammering and all that. So yeah, they're going to think we're all nuts, but whatever. Who cares? All right. So anyway, all right. Well, let's pray and we'll be dismissed. Lord, thank you so much just for the class and just for the dialogue tonight. I pray that you just use it to just to your honor and glory, and just I pray that if nothing else, it just ignites the desire to read your word and just to find out more about what you would have us to know. And we just thank you for your word and how you've just given us the whole story from start to finish, and we know that Jesus Christ is that story, and he's controlled the beginning, and he'll control the end as well. Pray that you'd give us a safe trip home, give us a great week this week, be with all those who are traveling, especially those who are sick, Lord. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.